So please welcome Jervey Tervalon.
Thanks, Jeff. It's an honor to be here. It's also an honor to try to live a literary life where you can produce work that might entertain people and make them think, that kind of thing. So every good thing in my life has come from writing. I have a little 6-year-old at home, my wife, my dog, my comic book collection. I owe all to writing. So I mean, I think that I look at it as serving the literary gods to some extent. The reason I think I became a writer is that I talked so much. I drove my older brothers nuts. They said, you talk all the time, you talk on the toilet, you talk on the tub. And at some point, no one wanted to hear me anymore. So I decided to have to find some other way of saying a lot of things to people. And studying at the College of Creative Studies was wonderful. Mudrick, having him as a professor or as my liege was pretty much like having Mel Brooks, in teaching your literary classes. And he was just funny and insightful. And sometimes he was like, what is the word? He could be offhanded and even cruel. And that, at one point he said that I was becoming a white writer. That was the most puzzling thing anyone has ever said to me. I was like, well, how do I become a white writer? And how have I arrived at this state? And what does that mean? I didn't say any of that to him. I just said that to myself because I would never want to make him mad at me. So I wrote this piece here for Mudrick's class. And this was literally written over 40 years ago, probably, yeah, about 40 years ago, I wrote this story. And I sat on this story for a long time because it was in a voice, I was writing essentially about something that did happen that I wanted to understand that was very young, but I was very young when it happened. And my mother didn't want me to really know so much about what had happened. So anyway, I'm gonna read this. It's pretty short, I think. And hopefully you'll find it of interest. We arrived at our uncle's house on 18th Street in the late afternoon. This 3-story Victorian was no longer weathered, but had been painted a very bright white, and the textured coated steps that had little flicks of shiny plastic that glinted in the light. From the top of the stairs, I looked out at San Francisco, stretching as far as I could see. Even a 10-year-old boy could see how beautiful the city was. Jervey, stop sulking, Mother said. Mama said in her, don't make me slap your voice. I'm not sulking, I said, not really sure what sulking meant. I hadn't wanted to go on the trip, but Mama made me. And I couldn't make myself look happy as she wanted me to look. I tried though. Mama couldn't tolerate attitude for long, not from me. At the door, Mama didn't bother to knock. She just walked in and headed to the kitchen. The house smelled of mildew, of something good. In the kitchen, I saw a short, dark-skinned woman frying breaded pork chops in a large iron pan. Billy, her husband, a portly old man with an unlit snub of a cigar in his mouth, sat at the table, reading the paper with such concentration he didn't notice us. Billy was Mama's uncle, her father's brother, but between them he could see the diversity of their family. He was as dark as she was light. Mama put her hand on his shoulder, and Billy looked up in surprise and hugged Mama, and Aunt Bessie hugged her too. I stayed in the doorway, hoping I didn't have to hug anybody. Bessie pointed to me. That boy of yours is getting big. I bet he wants to eat. I nodded. Those pork chops smelled really good. Oh yeah, he's always hungry. Want to eat, Jervey? Mama asked. I'm sure he do, Bessie said, laughing. Aunt Bessie served me the pork chop quickly, and I ate them just as quickly. Finished, I wondered where my cousins were. Sometimes they lived with their mother's parents, and sometimes they stayed with their father's parents. Mama said they didn't have it easy. Their dad got high, had a bad temper, and wasn't around much. I heard the front door open and wondered if the boys were back. It was Ann, Bessie's oldest daughter, talking to Mama. She liked Ann, even if she was always in trouble. Sorry. Bessie served her a plate, but Ann didn't seem interested in eating. Mama ignored me and made conversation with Ann, asking about when her boys would be home. They were staying with their cousin in Oakland. Anne said something vague about not being hungry. Instead, she smoked a cigarette so low I thought it might burn her hand. You're not hungry? You know, Bessie makes the best pork chops. You're on a diet, Mama asked. Anne smiled and shook her head. I'm waiting on Sonny to call. Going out? If he calls, she said pleasantly between pulls on the cigarette. Billy interrupted the conversation by producing a deck of cards and dealing Mama and Aunt Bessie into the game. Soon they were all looking at their hands, and I was looking at the stack of comics I brought from home. I would glance at Anne as she sipped at a hastily made rum and coke while checking her watch. She was a beautiful dark-skinned woman, and she knew I had a crush on her, and she would flirt with me to make my cheeks turn red. But tonight, she looked tense, and then she started giving her parents the eye. It went on long enough for me to finish my pork chop and start on another. I wonder how they could ignore her staring at them like she wanted to kill them. Why won't you tell me if he called? She shouted and stood bolt upright. Billy shook his head and Bessie flicked the ashes off her cigarette and gave Anne a stare that shut her up. Anne continued to lean forward like she might turn the table over, silence but not willing to back down. Then Bessie shot forward and shoved Anne into her seat. Billy ignored her. Bessie flicked the cigarette and gave Anne a stare again. It shut her up for a moment, a short moment. Anne leaned forward, silence but not willing to back down. Bessie wasn't having any of it. Lurching up, she pushed her daughter down into the seat. Don't crowd Lita's boy, he's eating. Anne popped back up. Why won't you people tell me? Did Sonny call? This time, Bessie ignored her. Billy gave her the slit-eyed challenge. Mama folded her arms and looked away. Anne's eyes glittered with rage. I'm gonna keep the boys over at their daddy's. I'm gonna stay with Sonny. Then you won't see me to fuck with me. Bessie sprang out of the seat and slapped Anne hard on the face, and she tumbled out of the chair. She got up screaming, you hate me, Anne said, and burst out of the room. I heard the front door smash against the wall and slam shut again. The house was quiet. Then after a long moment, Bessie started talking in a weird, hurried voice as though she was talking to herself. Anne gets pills in her. We don't know what to do with her. Then she goes and sees that Sonny, and you know he ain't no good for nothing. I think he got her on the pills. She wasn't half as crazy until he came around. Mama stood up, going to put the boy to bed. I like staying up around adults, and now that something interesting had happened, had to go to bed. It wasn't right. Come on, she said to me in her serious voice that meant business. I followed her as she trudged slowly up the steep stairs. Mama was winded, but she wouldn't slow her pace. At the landing, she paused and caught her breath, and then opened the door to the room where I would spend the night. Mama sat heavily on the narrow bed, and I sat next to her. How come I can't stay up and watch TV? I stay up at home. Why can't I do it here? This ain't your house, Mama said after taking deep breaths. I hate these fancy-ass homes with their ridiculous steep-ass steps. She stood up to leave. You gotta go to bed. Tomorrow I'll take you to the wharf and buy you a crab to eat. After Mom was gone, I noticed that the lowest window pane was missing. And I felt the San Francisco chill and fog creeping in. Next to the window was the clock radio that I turned on, and then I slipped under the thick blankets. I guess I found that station that Anne liked, because every song seemed to be about broken hearts and lost love. I tried reading comics, but I was too distracted. Something was going to happen. Then it began to drizzle, and a song came on that I hadn't heard before, A Rainy Night in Georgia. And that line, Lord, I feel it's raining all over the world, reverberated in my head. Perfectly sad. I was sadder and bluer than I'd ever been. Happy to feel so sad, safe, and secure in bed, with rain splattered monsters on the outside looking in. And I do this thing that you don't normally do when one writes fiction, changing the point of view rather abruptly for the first person. I don't know why I have to give you a fair warning. I put the boy to bed, thinking maybe I should have just taken off to a motel, knowing the shit's hitting the fan. But no, I had to be there. I returned to the kitchen where Bessie and Billy were waiting. The kitchen was quiet as we played, tight-lipped and dour. Anne would be back sooner or later. It would be a big mess. Oh, but otherwise, it was just stupid. I got good cards and won the next few hands, and my winning bothered penny-tight Billy. He puffed a cloud around his head with the little stub of a cigar he had in the corner of his mouth. As the game got hotter, we loosened up and made conversation about my long dead mother and my still alive loss of a father. Billy turned on the radio to hear a big band station. When Joe Williams came on, I almost forgot to be worried about and unhappy. I just wanted to believe all that mattered was sipping Billy's expensive cognac, listening to Joe Williams and Sarah Vaughan's beautiful voices. Finally, the fatigue of driving left me too drowsy to stay awake. I stood up ready for bed, and Ann came back into the house shouting at the rafters. He called, but you people wouldn't tell me. She stood in the doorway, and for a moment was calm. She talked evenly at first, but her voice grew louder and louder, and her eyes were crazy with contempt. We all ignored her, continued with the game, and watched for a while longer, and left the kitchen. I guess her boyfriend is coming to get her, I asked no one in particular. Who knows about those two? She uses the phone at the pay station so nobody can hear their important plans. Important plans. Only things that can happen between them two is her giving him her paycheck, Billy said. Once again, the front door flung open so hard that it boomed against the wall and slammed shut again. Billy scowled and puffed his cigar red. The best thing to do is lock her out of the house. We continued to play cards without interest until Bessie dropped her cards and stood up. I'm going to see if she's out there waiting on him. Bessie hurried out of the front door to look out the window and looked at Billy, who was still holding his cards ready to play them. Why don't you make sure Bessie don't be out there trying to drag her daughter in the house? He asked. I nodded, knowing it was on. There was nothing else to do but get in the middle of it. I looked through the bay window and saw Ann sitting on the bottom step in the San Francisco chill in a sleeveless blouse with no jacket on. Look at her, freezing her ass off, hoping her worthless, trashy boyfriend gonna see her tits and want to stay with her. He just wants her money. What kind of child I brought into this world, Bessie said in a rush of words. As we watched the Cadillac parked in front of the steps, Ann sprinted to the car and opened the car door and threw herself inside. The engine continued to run. We could see bodies silhouetted by the street light thrashing about. The door on Ann's side shot open and she came falling out. She tried to get back into the front seat, but a long leg kicked her completely away from the car. She lay sprawled on her back. Somehow Ann popped up and sprang back into the car. We heard a scream and Ann tumbled into the street again. Bessie broke out of the daze she was in and yelled at Billy. Billy, Ann and Sonny are going at it. Bessie pushed past me and ran to the door and opened it to see her daughter collapse on the steps, crying hysterically. I followed Bessie, and we both grabbed Ann by the arms and dragged her inside. Sonny got out of the car, slow and stiff, and walked unsteadily to the stairs. Billy had vanished, and I knew he was going for the gun in some whiskey-inspired courage. I knew how it would go. That's why I was there, to stop my uncle from doing exactly this, because I loved Billy and Bessie for being there for me when my father abandoned us. As soon as the gun came out, it was done. Somebody would get shot. I had to stop Billy from killing the fool on the steps. Something I knew he had been itching to do. I reached for the phone in the hallway and called the police. Everything was going to hell. The call was brief. A man was trying to break in. After explaining the situation for the fifth time, I rushed outside to see Sonny still there with his hand raised straight to the air. And even from the porch light, I could see the blood running down his arm. Look at what your daughter's done. Cut the shit out of me. Fucked up my jacket. Sonny seemed to take satisfaction in his injury. Pausing to look at it, he slipped out of the jacket and put it back into the car and returned, all still unsteady, to the steps. I wonder how high he had to be. My oldest boy had friends so high, they dropped like luggage into hedges, into lawns and sidewalks, and even the street. But they didn't die, as though stubs, red devils, barbiturates gave them circus trick indestructibleness. Your daughter is out of her fucking mind, cut me. He staggered forward, wandering in mangled circles. Get Ann in the house, I yelled at Bessie. And though she was small, a small woman, Bessie shoved Ann inside and waited for me to come in behind her, and then deadlocked it. Ann's docility evaporated once they were inside, but I didn't have time to help calm her down. I needed to intercept Billy before he killed that boy. I rushed for the bedroom, banged on the door. Billy answered it quickly with a blank expression on his face as though he wasn't studying me. He turned to her bed, lifted the mattress. He turned to the bed, lifted the mattress, and pulled from under it a sharp-handled .38. He put the gun into the pocket of his baggy pants and started for the door. I blocked him, but somehow Billy got in front of me. Billy, you can't go out there. You go with that gun, you're gonna end up shooting that boy. Billy shook his head, and I could smell the whiskey on his breath. I told him I'll shoot him if he beat my daughter again. I'm gonna talk to him, get him to go. No, Lita, I'm gonna talk to him. Give me a minute. Now, Lita, I'm gonna take care of it, he said, and tried to shove me back. Whatever restraint that held me back from rage vanished. Get back, get your ass in the house, like I said. Billy knew better than to get me any madder. So he retreated, and I walked outside and faced Sonny, the top of the stairs. Sonny didn't seem to see me there standing in front of him. Was it blood then, or the drug days he was in? And suddenly he was raging. Who are you? I don't know who you are. Where's Billy? I want to show him what he did to me. The blood running down his hand, dripping steps, made my stomach churn. I took my scarf and tried to wrap his hand. He jerked away. I don't need no brag. I want to talk to daddy. He's gonna pay me to get me stitched up. I want some money, or I'm gonna kick his ass too. Go away, he's in there, and I don't want no shit from you. Lady, I don't know you, and I don't know why you out here talking to me. Send out Billy. He pissed me off to the point where I wanted to shoot him, but I hate guns. Pots and brooms are my weapons of choice. Watching him stand at the edge of the stairs, swaying slowly to an inner motion, disgusted me, and I was sick of him and the situation. I shoved him so hard, I almost fell with him as he fell, grabbing for the railings as he rolled back down the stairs. I went back into the house and looked for Billy. He wasn't there, and neither was Bessie and Ann. I rushed for Ann's bedroom and caught my breath when I saw Bessie rubbing Ann's back while Ann cried softly. Bessie waved me to come to her. I got rid of him, I said. Bessie nodded and shuddered. Lita, thank you. Her eyes were wet with tears. Then we heard the shouting from the street. Bessie was at the window first, and Ann shoved me out of the way. I saw Billy and Sonny at the bottom of the stairs. Sonny had something in his hands. It looked to be a bumper jack. He was waving it at Billy, and Billy was on the top last step, not backing up when Billy pulled out the .38. Sonny stepped back. Then there was a flash, a sudden brightness, and Sonny staggered backwards, but didn't fall. I burst out the house and down the stairs to hear Sonny saying in what sounded like a whine, "You killing me, Billy, you killing me." Then he fell to the ground. I couldn't stop myself from running to my boy's bedroom and saw he was sleeping, head resting on scattered comics, the radio and the lamp light on. Sure that he was safe, I grabbed a blanket from the floor and returned outside. I saw Ann kneeling next to Sonny, praying and shouting her grief as she frantically rubbed his chest. He was rapidly rising and falling. "He ain't dead. What are you trying to do? He ain't dead, and you're trying to rub the bullets into his heart," I said. Ann stood and wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. I ignored her and slid my sweater under Sonny's head. Even though it was night, I could see the color drain out of his face as the blood pooled around him. I covered him with a blanket, but he was just about dead. Ann could see it too, sprang up screaming and ran for the house. At the top of the stairs, she turned and screamed, "You people killed my man. I can't even have a man." Bessie and I watched Ann disappear. in the house. Then after a long pause, Bessie hurried up the stairs after her daughter. I stayed by the body until the police came. 3 cars arrived at once with sirens and lights blaring. 2 officers approached with shotguns pointed at me, shouting to see my hands. For me to stand, for me to back away. But as they got close, they saw me, a colored woman who looked white, standing next to a dying black man. "What's going on here?" One asked with concern more than menace. I didn't pause. I knew what needed to be done. The blood was always thicker than the mud. If I didn't play the part just right, Billy was going to jail for life, and that wasn't going to happen. This man, Sonny is his name, I think, was very drunk, and he began beating my cousin Ann, and my uncle, her dad, tried to prevent him from beating her, and then he attacked him, and my uncle shot him in self-defense. The cop looked at me and saw an attractive, heavy-set white woman who was calm and collected. I knew I had the police where they needed to be, but I heard from the top of the stairs, the front door opening, and it was Ann, crazy ass Ann, that might get them all arrested or worse. I knew how it had to be played. Psycho drug boyfriend attacked his girlfriend. Daddy had to protect his baby girl, and he did. And that fool got killed, and there was a white woman to explain all of this to them. And now Ann opened the door and came down the stairs as though she was sane, sobbing just so, and trembling just enough. She held her hands out for them to see she carried nothing. In her tight blouse and pants testified she had no weapons. One of the police pulled out a notebook and walked Ann away from us. I heard Ann talking in her fourth grade teacher voice, clear and pleasant. It was it. The whole night was a television show that abruptly changed to a different channel. The police questioning me touched my arm. Where's Billy? In the house, in his room. He's terrified. Tell him he needs to come down here and talk to us. He will. He was just defending his family, I said. I hurried up the stairs, but took a moment to look back at Ann, talking eminently to an officer who seemed riveted by her low cut blouse. That gave me just a bit of hope that maybe this night would end without more bloodshed. A police officer had covered Sonny's body. The other was waiting in the notebook, writing in a notebook. More police had arrived and had gathered around their cars, shotguns and rifles slung over their shoulders, looking menacing as though they were planning on dragging Billy out, dead or alive. I felt the panic. It was on me to make this work. I walked into the house just as a police helicopter circled overhead, illuminating the street, drawing the neighbors to come outside to be blinded. I found Bessie by Billy's door, banging on it, pleading for him to come outside with her gravelly voice and him cursing her with crazy anger. I nudged her aside and shouted his name sharply, and he opened the door, puffing on a cigar. Lita, he said, the anger vanished like a drop of water on a hot skillet. Talk to the police before they come in here and kill you. Billy's head slumped, and I took his hand and led him down the stairs, nudging him to put his hands up as we walked down to the waiting small army as the FSPD. I didn't know the story went on. Okay. Okay. I woke when the bed tilted to one side, and I saw Mama next to me shaking my shoulder. I could see she was tired. Her hair was messed up, and her clothes were wrinkled as if she had slept in them. She put her hand on my shoulder. We're leaving, get dressed, come down for breakfast. Going? We haven't gone to the Warford, the Golden Gate Park. You said you want to see that haunted house, Winchester Mystery House, whatever it's called. I'm going to take you there and we'll get a motel. I stood up in bed and looked away from Mama to the blue morning and the rolling white clouds. She pushed herself off the bed. Hurry, I want to be in San Jose before noon. Mama handed me fresh clothes and I left the room. I sat on the side of the bed until I was fully conscious before dressing. I couldn't stop looking out of the window. It was such a beautiful day, but Mama was grim as I can remember. She often got angry but grim. I couldn't remember her ever being grim. Mama took the travel bag and left the room. She, still confused from the early morning awakening, I sat on the side of the bed and again looked out the window to the gorgeous blue day, happy we were leaving so soon. I dressed quickly, gathered my comics, and left the room. While walking down the stairs, I smelled bacon frying. When I entered the kitchen, Bessie was cooking at the stove, and Billy was sitting at the table smoking a cigar. Mama was sitting at his elbow, ignoring the cloud of cigar smoke. Breakfast ready, Mom? Then I saw how exhausted Mom was, how exhausted everybody was. Bessie was frying bacon, looking exhausted on her feet. She hadn't said good morning to me, and neither did Billy. They were always saying good morning. Something. Bessie put the grits and bacon into a plate on the table for me. Jervey, could you get the newspaper off the curb? I nodded and hurried outside and down the stairs so I could come back and eat before my grits got cold. Outside, the chill of the air and beautiful morning caught my attention. But as I walked down the stairs, I saw brownish drops. I followed the drops until they led to the sidewalk, where there was a large smeared red stain. Somebody had recently hosed down the spot. The concrete was still wet. I got the newspaper, hurried back, and handed it to Bessie. Mama and Billy crowded around her. Bessie's fingers nervously tried to untie the string around the paper. Finally, she grabbed a butter knife and cut the string and flipped through the newspaper. "Here it is," Bessie said. They huddled together and all three of them brought their paper closer to read it. "Lita, can you read this?" Mama shook her head. "My reading glasses broke." "I can read it," I said. Bessie handed me the paper. I read it slowly, pronouncing every word clearly and loudly so they could hear. Sonny Clark of San Francisco was shot and killed at 18th Street at 10 p.m. Friday night. Witnesses said that he attacked William Johnson with a bumperjack, and Johnson shot in self-defense. No charges were made. Everybody said back, I finished breakfast wondering how could I have slept with somebody getting shot right in front of the house. Mama stood up. "Well, it's time to get on the road." Bessie hugged Mama tightly, still smoking a cigarette. I watched the bob and weave without dropping ashes. "Thanks, Lita. Thanks for everything." Billy gave her a hug too as they headed for the front door. I counted the drops of blood on those white stairs with flecks of glittering plastic. I got up to 30 before they got to the bottom. Everybody hugged and got into the car, and Mama drove away. And I watched Billy and Bessie wave to us. I waited until we were out of San Francisco before I asked her, "What happened last night?" Mama ignored me. "Somebody got shot?" She continued to ignore me. I watched her, expecting an answer that she didn't want to give. Finally, she spoke without looking at me. "Billy shot a robber. Now shut up because I don't want to talk about it." I shut up. She'd only get madder if I pressed her. That wasn't the truth, but how would I find out what happened sooner or later? Thank you. Do you have any questions or anything about that? Yeah.
Is that the story where you said you were going to be a white writer?
I don't know. It was an interesting story to write because my brother just recently told me that line, I guess, he managed to add it when he said, "You're killing me, Billy." Supposedly my brother told me he heard them say that because my brother was there and had no idea my older brother, he's 10 years older than me. So he was aware of much more than I was. But pretty much this is kind of what happened that I managed to piece together because my mother never wanted to tell me the entire story. But the blood, the drops of blood on the white steps with the kind of, they put that plastic to make things look, yeah, and I remember going there the night before and it was so clean and you could see the little glinting plastic on the steps. And then there were little drops of blood that went all the way down to the street. So yeah, I wrote this long ago and finally it's published literally 40 years ago, 45 years ago. Any other comments or? Well, I'm not a sociopath, and I've never shot a gun. I think I've held a shotgun. I've had them pointed at me a number of times. My girlfriend's stepfather who had an aneurysm was losing his mind. He was a pleasant guy. Where my girlfriend was in the kitchen, I was in high school, making French fries and hot dogs. And it was very wholesome. And the guy said, "You're touching my daughter." And he left and came back in sweating. And I was thinking, I should leave now. My friend, and this guy came back with a shotgun. And we just smiled, because what are you going to do? I mean, you can't run. You're just trapped in the kitchen. So you just try to think of something witty to say. But my skinny high school girlfriend ran over and grabbed the shotgun from him, yanked it out of his hands, took it outside, and smashed it against the sidewalk. And that was that. And as we're driving away, I was like, "You're my hero. You saved our lives." And then her sister laughed and said, "Oh, we hid all of the shotgun shells. And then someone else said, yeah, but it's easy to get shotgun shells. And so that was such a grueling piece that I thought I would read something that's kind of lighthearted. If there's any comments you guys want to ask me? Yeah.
So it's been 40 years since you've written it, or is that right?
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
So now that this has come to light again, have you done any editing, or is it as it was?
No, I did, yeah, over the time I edited, and just something I added not that long ago that I thought about, or something my mother said that before she passed. Something more about the situation that I didn't know. But it was, my best-selling book was in the voice of my mother. So for some reason, I feel comfortable writing the voice of a woman who's much older than me. So I'm not sure exactly why I developed the need to write in her voice, but I've written a number of books. She was a very beautiful woman when she was younger, and then it was a scourge in Pepsi caused massive obesity in people. So my mother, gained a lot of weight and everything. And then eventually when she stopped drinking soda, she lost a lot of weight. That one's kind of grueling, so I'm going to read something a little lighter if you guys do. Okay. The life of a writer is strange because if you ask people to read your book, you're basically asking them to do work. So they secretly hate you. So, it's a strange business to be involved in. So this is, it's like I've sold a number of books. And like I said earlier, every good thing in my life has come from writing. And the only reason my wife married me is that she asked me, what do you do at some horrible party, food event where I was tired of drinking and all I wanted to do was get out of there. And I said, I'm a writer. And she said, oh, she was interested. That never happens. If you tell somebody you're a writer, they just immediately run away. If you say you're a screenwriter, they want to hang around. For some reason, if you write fiction, you're just, oh my God, what's wrong with you? Okay, so this one's fairly short. Not long ago, I got a message from Terry McMillan asking me why I wasn't publishing. I was touched that she asked, but I didn't have an answer. I had written a novel that I thought was very good, but my agent showed little interest. And I lost interest in doing what I did when I was starting out, hustling like my life depended on me selling my second book, Living for the City, a collection of stories about growing up in Black LA. I literally chased a small press publisher. He looked remarkably like Barney Rubble down a hallway at Beyond Broke to get him to read my manuscript. And to my surprise, he published Living for the City. Later, I talked to his literary editor who selected the book, a Latina from East LA, who said it was the only book he ever published that she liked. Living for the City got good reviews and it sold reasonably well, or so I believe, but the publisher wouldn't send me a royalty statement. My friend Jimmy Jazz, who knew him well, said, he'll never pay you, he just doesn't pay. I lost it then. I felt the kind of bubbling rage you feel when you discover your wife having an affair with a guy with a jerry curl. My ex-wife had an affair with a guy with a jerry curl. And I'm not sure if you all are familiar with jerry curls. But for Black people, the jerry curl was the most despicable hairstyle that ever occurred. First of all, if a person had a jerry curl and they sat in their car, they could fuck your car up because it was so oily, yeah, that your seats were ruined. So it was really a strange thing that people wanted to wear a hairstyle that ruined people's cars. I called him repeatedly, but he calmly explained he didn't owe me any money, and that was that. I wanted to fly to New York and nut up on him, which means to get very angry, but it wasn't a reasonable thing to do. I stewed about for weeks about how to respond to this guy who seemed to take pleasure in screwing defenseless writers over. We're always getting screwed over. And one of my former students contacted me about writing him a letter of recommendation. He mentioned that he was living in New York City. Marco was tall, a tall, chill Latino kid who could really write and whom I liked a lot. Marco could have been an actor playing the tough bad guys if he was so inclined. I explained the situation to him and asked that he would go to Gary's office and leave a love letter for him. Marco asked, a love letter? Yeah, I don't think you can get charged with that threatening somebody if you send them a love letter. What kind of love letter is that? I hung up and wrote a love letter. It read, Gary, I'm coming to New York to share my love with you. I need to share my love with you. You can expect me soon. Gary called me within minutes. Jervey, I like you too, but you know, I hung up. Marco looked up the address of Gary's office and burst in and flung the door open. Before the receptionist could respond, he tossed the love letter onto the desk of the shocked receptionist and left. Within a few days, I received a check for $500 and 3 boxes of living for the city. I never heard from Gary again. Though I heard he went on to become a documentary filmmaker, a field where he probably got fewer love letters.